Theo Bramwell was 41 years old, and until that Tuesday evening, he thought a cancelled fishing trip was the worst thing his wife had done to him that year. 11 years of marriage. 11 years of him folding first, keeping the peace, letting Adrian have the last word. She'd cancelled his boys' trip 2 days before departure, telling him flatly it was to show him who's in charge. Theo decided to quietly rebook it himself. He opened their joint bank account to restore the deposit. That's when he saw it. A recurring charge every month for over a year to a property management company in a city Adrian only visited for conferences. Thousands of dollars, 14 payments, a second life, funded in silence while he worked overtime to build their first one. His wife thought she'd just proven who held the power in their marriage. She had no idea what she'd just handed him instead. And in that moment, staring at his screen, Theo made a decision that would end everything she thought she'd gotten away with. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The duffel bag was already half full, and Theo Bramwell was humming. It was an old song, something from the radio in his dad's truck when he was a kid. He couldn't remember the name of it. Didn't matter. He hummed it every year while he packed for this trip, without even realizing he was doing it. He laid the fishing gear out on the bed, piece by piece, the way a surgeon lays out tools. His lucky lure, a battered chartreuse spinner that Wynne swore was ugly enough to scare the fish right onto the hook. His waterproof jacket, faded to a pale gray. 2 pairs of wool socks. A headlamp with fresh batteries. He'd been running this same mental checklist for 10 years now, and it still gave him a small, private satisfaction every time. That was Theo. Methodical, patient, a man who found calm in order. At work, that quality had taken him far. He was a senior project manager at Harrow Logistics, a mid-size firm that moved goods through 6 states, and his team ran clean. No blown timelines, no budget surprises. His boss, Dana Keel, had called him the most reliable man in this building at his last review, and she'd said it like she was talking about the foundation of the building itself, something solid that held everything else up. He'd built a good life. He knew that. He and Adrian had been married 11 years. They had a daughter, Faye, who was 16 and sharp as a tack. They had a 4-bedroom house in a quiet part of Chandler, 2 cars, a joint savings account, a social circle that regularly commented on what a great couple they made. From the outside, everything looked steady. Theo folded his waterproof jacket and pressed it into the bag. He'd learned early in the marriage to keep things smooth. Not because he was a pushover, he didn't think of himself that way, but because he was practical. Adrian had strong opinions. She liked things a certain way. When she pushed, Theo had developed the habit of stepping back, letting the moment cool, finding some middle ground she could live with. It had worked, more or less. The house stayed peaceful. Faye grew up without screaming matches for background noise. What Theo told himself was that he was choosing his battles. He tried not to think too hard about the fact that he never seemed to win any of them. He tucked the spinner lure into the front pocket of the bag and reached for his phone. 3 weeks ago, the arguments had started circling money. Theo had raised a concern, a measured one, about the shared account running lighter than usual. He'd shown Adrian a simple spreadsheet, nothing accusatory, just numbers. She'd gone cold immediately, told him he was being controlling, and the conversation had collapsed. He'd let it go. He was good at letting things go. That was around the time she started taking phone calls in the back bedroom with the door shut. He'd noticed it the way you notice a small crack in the ceiling. Your eyes land on it, you file it away. You tell yourself it's nothing structural. When he'd mentioned the fishing trip 2 weekends ago, she'd barely looked up from her laptop. That's still happening? Like it was some minor inconvenience he'd scheduled without asking. He'd said yes, same as every year. She'd made a small sound in her throat and gone back to her screen. Theo had chalked it up to stress. Adrienne's job was demanding. She was gunning for a regional director promotion and carried that ambition the way other people carried tension in their shoulders, constantly, quietly, in a way that affected everyone nearby. Normal marital friction, that's what he told himself. He picked up his phone and pulled up his thread with Wynne. Gears packed. You confirm the cabin? Wynne's reply came in under a minute, the way Wynne's replies always did. Done and done. Dawson and Reeves are already talking trash about the fish count. 2 days, brother. Theo smiled at his phone. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. He typed back a fishing rod emoji and set the phone on the nightstand. He reached for the duffel bag's zipper. That's when he heard her footsteps in the hallway. Adrienne appeared in the doorway. She was still dressed from work, cream blazer, dark slacks, hair pulled back tight. Her arms were crossed over her chest, not leaning against the door frame the way a person does when they're relaxed, planted, like she'd positioned herself on purpose. I canceled it, she said. Theo's hands stopped on the zipper. What? The cabin deposit, the shared card reservation for the trip. Her voice was flat and even, like she was reading off a list. I canceled both. He stared at her. Why would you do that? To show you who's in charge. She said it without blinking, without a flicker of heat or regret. Just those 6 words, delivered like a verdict. After what you pulled with that spreadsheet last month, questioning me like that, you needed to understand something. Theo stood there with the duffel bag in his hand. He didn't move. The humming had stopped completely, and he hadn't even noticed when. She turned around and walked out like the conversation was over. Because, to her, it was. Theo stood at the foot of the bed, with the duffel bag still hanging from his hand. He listened to her heels click down the hallway, measured and unhurried. No door slam, no raised voice trailing behind her. Just that steady, deliberate rhythm. And then, silence. He set the bag down on the mattress. Adrienne. The footsteps stopped. He walked to the doorway and found her standing in the hall, already half-turned toward the kitchen, like she'd simply paused a task instead of a marriage. I need you to explain that to me, he said. Walk me through it. She looked at him the way you look at something mildly inconvenient. A slow red light. A wrong order at a drive-thru. I already did, she said. No, you told me what you did. I'm asking why. Adrienne shifted her weight to one hip. She let out a small breath through her nose. Not a sigh exactly. More like the sound of patience being rationed. That spreadsheet, she said. The way you laid it out on the table like I was one of your little employees, like you were auditing me. Her chin lifted slightly. I didn't like it. I told you I didn't like it, and you brushed me off. So, I wanted to remind you that this is not a one-way street. By canceling my trip, by demonstrating, she said, that I have access to the same things you do. Theo looked at her for a long moment. He kept his face still. He was very good at keeping his face still. That was 3 weeks ago, he said. She didn't answer. I raised that concern 3 weeks ago, and you've been sitting on this since then. A small shrug. I waited for the right time. There it was. He had been standing in this bedroom, laying out his lure and his socks and his fresh batteries, humming some song from his childhood, and she had already made her move. She hadn't done it in a hot moment. She hadn't acted out of impulse or hurt feelings in the heat of an argument. She had waited. She had planned it out and chosen her timing, and then walked in here with her arms folded and delivered it clean. That was the thing that hit him hardest. Not the cancellation itself, the calculation behind it. I need some air, Theo said. She nodded. Already done with him. Dinner's at 7. He walked to his home office and closed the door behind him. The room was small and orderly. A standing desk, a monitor, shelves lined with project binders and a few framed photos. One of Faye at 13, holding up a catfish she'd caught with a look of total disgust on her face. One of him and Win at last year's trip, sunburned and laughing. He sat down, opened his laptop, and pulled up the bank's website. He wasn't going to let it stand. That was the one clear thought cutting through everything else. He was going to rebook the cabin himself tonight, and he was going to text Win and tell him it was handled. The trip was happening. She didn't get to take that from him. He logged in. The page loaded. He went straight to the joint checking account and clicked it open. The balance sat at the top of the screen, and for a moment his brain didn't fully process what he was seeing. He'd run a rough calculation in his head on the walk over. They kept a healthy buffer in that account. Always had. The number on the screen was roughly $4,000 lighter than it should have been. He leaned forward. He clicked the transaction history and started scrolling. His eyes moved quickly, scanning for anything that looked off. There were the usual entries: utilities, groceries, the car insurance payment, Faye's school activity fee. And then he found it. A line item that appeared once a month, going back further than he'd scrolled at first. He had to pull the history out to 6 months to see how far it ran. Maybe further. Meridian Prop MGMT, Scottsdale Division, a property management company. Autopay, recurring, pulling a consistent amount each month. Not a small amount. Scottsdale. Theo sat back slowly in his chair. Adrienne went to Scottsdale twice a year, at least. Industry conferences, she'd always said. 2, 3 nights at a time. Never a big deal. He'd never had a reason to think twice about it. He stared at the line item on the screen. His stomach dropped like something had come loose inside him. He scrolled up, then back down. The charge was there every month, regular as rent. Because that's exactly what rent looked like. Theo didn't move for a long time. The house had gone quiet around him. He could hear the refrigerator hum from down the hall. The faint sound of the television in the bedroom, Adrienne watching one of her shows, volume low. Normal sounds, a normal house. He stared at the screen. Meridian Prop MGMT, Scottsdale Division. He clicked it again, like maybe it would change. It didn't. Same amount, same company, same city. 12 entries going back over a year. He counted them twice. He grabbed a legal pad from the desk drawer and wrote down the exact dollar amount per month. Multiplied it by 12. Wrote that number down too, then underlined it. He sat with it. A property management company meant a property. A property meant a lease. A lease meant someone was paying monthly to stay somewhere, and the money paying for it was coming out of their joint account, quietly, in an amount small enough to get lost inside the normal noise of a household budget, but large enough to matter. He hadn't noticed it. That was the part that stuck. He was a senior project manager. He tracked timelines, budgets, resource allocation. He caught discrepancies before they became problems. That was his entire job. And he had sat here in this same house, month after month, without once catching this, because he hadn't been looking. He closed the laptop. He didn't go back to the bedroom that night. The next morning, Adrienne left for work at her usual time. Heels on the hardwood, keys off the hook, the front door pulling shut behind her with a clean click. Theo sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He didn't call her. He didn't text her. He had nothing to say to her yet. Not because he was afraid, but because he didn't have the full picture. And he had learned a long time ago, in conference rooms and on job sites, that the worst move you could make was to tip your hand before you understood what you were holding. She wanted to show him who was in charge. Fine. He started with her car's extended warranty. It was on an auto-pay tied to his email. He'd set it up originally. 3 clicks to cancel it. He did it without ceremony and moved on. Next was the spa. She went every 3 weeks, a standing appointment she'd had for years. He found the membership portal, logged in with the shared credentials stored in their family password folder, the same one she'd used to cancel his cabin deposit, and suspended the account. He paused on that one for just a second. Then he kept going. The streaming services were easy. 4 of them. She watched 2 exclusively. Faye used the others. He canceled Adrienne's 2 and left the rest untouched. He wasn't trying to hurt Faye. He was precise about that. He moved carefully, cutting only what was hers. The grocery delivery subscription she used 3 or 4 times a week? Gone. The joint travel rewards account took a little longer. He'd had to dig into the history on that one, and what he found there added another layer to everything. The points balance was nearly half what it should have been, drawn down in chunks that matched the dates of her Scottsdale trips. She'd been using their shared rewards to cover flights and hotel upgrades on top of whatever else she'd been doing out there. He wrote that down on the legal pad, too. Then he opened a different folder on his laptop. One he'd created 6 months ago, labeled with nothing but a date. Inside it was a single PDF confirmation, a venue deposit receipt for a private event space downtown, a rooftop room with a view of the city, good for 40 guests. He'd put the deposit down quietly, planning to surprise her for her 40th birthday in 3 months. He'd been genuinely excited about it. He read the cancellation policy, filled out the form, and submitted the request. He watched the confirmation email land in his inbox. He felt almost nothing. She came to him on the second evening. He was in the kitchen making coffee when she walked in, holding her phone, her face tight in a way he recognized, the controlled version of angry, the one she used when she wanted to seem reasonable, but wasn't. "My spa membership is suspended," she said. "My streaming is gone. The grocery delivery is canceled, and I just tried to use the travel rewards account, and it's been locked." She set the phone face down on the counter. "Did you do this?" "Yes," Theo said. "Why?" He turned to face her fully. He kept his voice even and his hands loose at his sides. "You showed me who's in charge," he said. "I heard you." Her mouth opened slightly. She waited for more. He picked up his coffee and walked past her out of the kitchen. Wynne was already in the booth when Theo arrived. That was Wynne's way. Always early, coffee already ordered, reading something on his phone with his glasses pushed up on his forehead. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head, and the kind of easy laugh that made rooms feel smaller and warmer. He'd been Theo's closest friend since their sophomore year of college, and in the 20-plus years since, Theo had never once had to explain himself slowly to Wynne. The man read people the way other people read menus, fast and accurate. He looked up when Theo slid into the seat across from him. "You look terrible," Wynne said. "I need a favor," Theo said. He opened the laptop, turned it around, and pushed it across the table without another word. Wynne leaned in, put his glasses down, and read the screen. His expression didn't change much, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Meridian Property Management," Wynne said. "Scottsdale Division. 14 months of payments," Theo said. "Out of our joint account." Wynne looked up. "She know you found it?" "No." Wynne nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, and set it back down with the careful deliberateness of a man organizing his thoughts. "You want me to find out what it's attached to. I want to know what property, what lease, whose name is on it," Theo said, quietly. "Nothing that points back to me." "I've got a contact at a property management group downtown," Wynne said. "He's got connections with companies like this. Won't take long." He looked at Theo again, steady and direct. "You doing okay?" "I'm doing what needs doing," Theo said. Wynne accepted that. He closed the laptop and slid it back. Theo drove home and walked through the front door at his normal time. He hung up his jacket. He asked Adrienne how her day was. She gave him a short answer. He gave her one back. They moved around each other in the kitchen like 2 people sharing a space, Polite and careful, the silence between them smoothed over just enough to pass for ordinary. He was good at it. He'd had years of practice. Faye was at the kitchen table doing homework, earbuds in, pencil moving across a notebook. She pulled one earbud out when Theo sat down beside her. "Dad, can you check my math?" He looked at the paper. "Geometry. You've got this one wrong," he said, pointing. She groaned. "I knew it. I redid that one 3 times. You're setting up the formula backwards. Flip it." She erased it, worked through it again, and got it right. She looked up at him with a grin that she'd had since she was about 4 years old, wide and a little crooked, and something in his chest tightened quietly. He kept his face easy. "There you go." He thought about the college fund account later that night, lying in the dark on his side of the bed, staring at the ceiling while Adrian slept beside him. He hadn't checked that account yet. He wasn't ready to. He told himself it was because he needed to wait for Wynn's information first. Build the picture in order, don't get ahead of yourself. And that was partly true. But partly, he just wasn't ready. Wynn called on a Thursday, 6 days after the diner. Theo stepped out of a project review meeting, walked to the end of the hallway, and answered on the second ring. "It's a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side," Wynn said. "Lease started 14 months ago. Monthly rate matches what you're seeing in the account." A pause. "It's a shared lease, Theo. 2 names on it." Theo pressed his back against the wall. "Who's the second name?" "I'll send you everything I've got," Wynn said. "I'm sorry, man." "Send it," Theo said. He stood in the hallway for a moment after the call ended, phone still in his hand. Down the hall, he could hear someone laughing in the break room. A normal Thursday. He put the phone in his pocket and went back into the meeting. He drove to his mother's house that Sunday. Priscilla Odom lived in the same house she'd raised him in, a neat brick ranch on a quiet street, with a flower bed out front she tended like it was a second job. She'd retired from her paralegal position 4 years ago and filled the time with her garden, her church friends, and, Theo knew, keeping a very close eye on her only son, without ever seeming like she was watching. She had dinner on the table before he even got through the door. Roast chicken, rice, green beans. She didn't ask why he'd come on a Sunday without calling ahead. She just made a plate and set it in front of him. They talked about nothing through most of the meal. Faye's school, a neighbor's new fence, the weather doing whatever it wanted lately. Then she put her fork down and looked at him. "Tell me what's happening," she said. It wasn't a question. He told her. All of it. The canceled trip, the account, the property management charge, what Wynn had found. He laid it out the same way he would a project report, flat and ordered. And he watched his mother's face stay calm and still through all of it. When he finished, she reached across the table and took his hand. "Don't get mad, baby," she said. "Get accurate." Theo looked at her. He nodded once. He drove home that night with something solid sitting in his chest. Not rage, not grief. Something harder than both. The apartment building was a 3-story brick structure on Kellner Avenue. The kind of place that tried to look upscale without quite getting there. Stone planters out front with trimmed hedges. A glass door with a brushed metal handle. A small parking lot off to the side. Maybe 20 spots. Theo sat in his car across the street with a gas station sandwich he wasn't eating. He'd been there 11 minutes when a silver Audi pulled into the lot. The man who stepped out was tall, well-dressed, charcoal slacks, a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow. He moved like someone who'd never once questioned whether he belonged somewhere. Easy stride, shoulders back. He reached the front door of the building. Didn't buzz anyone? Didn't wait. He pulled a key from his pocket and walked straight in. Theo watched the door close behind him. He sat there another minute. The sandwich sat in his lap. He looked at the building's face, the windows, the clean curtains, the ordinary brick, and felt something cold move through him. Not surprise. He'd passed surprise days ago. What he felt now was confirmation. He put the car in drive and went back to work. That night, he texted Wynne a single line. "I saw him. It's real. I need to know who he is professionally." Wynne responded 20 minutes later. "Already working on it. Got somebody." Wynne's contact was a woman named Denise, who worked in the operations department at Adrienne's company. She and Wynne had been friendly for years through a shared industry association. Wynne didn't tell her everything. He told her just enough, that he was trying to understand a workplace situation quietly, that it involved Garrison Locke and a promotion, and that anything documented would be useful. Denise was careful, but she was also, as Wynne put it, not a fan of Garrison. She started forwarding things. It took 5 days to piece together the picture. Garrison Locke had been with Adrienne's company for 3 years. Before that, 2 other companies in 4 years, always moving up, always leaving before something caught up with him. His performance reviews were solid, but not exceptional. He was, by every measurable standard, a decent candidate for the regional director promotion being decided this quarter. Except he wasn't competing on his own merits. Theo and Wynne sat at Wynne's kitchen table on a Wednesday evening, printed pages spread between them, going through everything Denise had sent. There was a name that kept appearing in the documents, a woman named Carol Reyes. She was Adrienne's peer, a senior regional manager with 12 years at the company and the strongest performance numbers in the division. She was, by every measurable standard, the obvious choice. "Look at this one," Wynne said, sliding a page across the table. It was an email from Adrienne to her direct supervisor, sent 2 months ago. It read smoothly, professionally, the language careful and reasonable, exactly the kind of email someone writes when they want to sound neutral while landing a knife. "I do want to flag some concerns I've been hearing from the field team about Carol's responsiveness during the Henderson rollout. Nothing I can quantify, just a pattern of feedback I felt you should be aware of. I'd hate for it to become a blind spot going into the Q3 evaluation." Another email, 3 weeks later, to a different senior leader. "Carol's a strong performer overall, but a few of us have noticed she's seemed distracted lately. I hope everything's okay with her personally. Just wanted to make sure leadership had the full picture." There were 4 more like it. Different recipients, different wording, same surgical intent. Each one planting a small seed of doubt. Each one making Carol Reyes look just slightly less reliable, just slightly less ready, to the people who would be sitting in the room when the promotion was decided. None of it was loud, none of it was traceable to malice on a quick read. It was exactly the kind of thing that worked because it looked like concern. Theo read each page slowly. The gas station sandwich from earlier was still sitting in the bag by Wynne's door, untouched again. He got to the last page and set it flat on the table. Wynne was watching him. "You all right?" Theo's jaw was tight. He could feel it. He put his hand flat on the stack of papers and looked at the top sheet without reading it any more. He thought about Adrienne's voice in their bedroom, "To show you who's in charge." He'd thought that was the thing. He'd thought that was the size of it. A petty power move. A bad moment in a difficult marriage. He'd been wrong about the size. This wasn't a moment. This wasn't even about him. She'd been running a whole separate operation, one that had a real person, Carol Reyes, quietly losing ground because of words she'd never see coming from a direction she'd never expect. 12 years of work, and someone was leaning over a desk and whispering doubts into the right ears, clearing a path for a man who didn't earn it. Theo picked up the stack of papers and squared the edges against the table. "I need copies of all of this," he said. The house was quiet. Adrienne had left that morning with a rolling carry-on and a blazer draped over her arm, already on the phone before she reached the garage door. "Conference in Dallas," she'd said. Back Sunday night. Faye was at her friend Keisha's place for the day. Theo sat at his home office desk in the kind of silence that used to feel peaceful. He had a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. His laptop was open. Outside the window, the neighbor's lawn mower started up and then faded as the man pushed it around to the back of the house. Theo opened the browser. He had been putting this off. Not consciously, he hadn't told himself don't look, but he'd circled around it for days, keeping his attention on the apartment records and the emails about Carol Reyes, staying focused on what he already had. But something had been sitting in the back of his mind since the night he'd first spotted the property management charge. A small, quiet question he hadn't let himself ask out loud yet. Where did the rest of the money go? He logged into the family's financial portal, the joint checking account, the savings account, the investment accounts. He'd been through those. He navigated past them. He clicked on the subfolder he almost never opened because there'd never been a reason to, because it had always just been running quietly in the background the way it was supposed to. Faye's College Fund. The account summary loaded. Theo looked at the balance. Then he looked again. He pulled up the transaction history and scrolled back 12 months. The withdrawals were not dramatic. That was the first thing he noticed. They weren't big round numbers that screamed theft. They were $400 here, $650 there, $900 on a Tuesday in February, $750 in late March, spaced out. Irregular enough to look almost accidental. Regular enough, once you laid them out in a row, to tell a very clear story. He grabbed a legal pad from his desk drawer and started writing down the amounts and dates by hand. By the time he reached 12 months back, his handwriting had gotten smaller and more deliberate, the way it always did when he was concentrating hard on not reacting. He added up the total. He sat back in his chair. $11,240. Gone. He picked up his phone and called the bank. He kept his voice even through the whole conversation. Account verification, security questions, his explanation that he was trying to understand a series of withdrawals from a joint savings product. The representative put him on hold for 3 minutes. When she came back, she confirmed what he already suspected. The withdrawals had been authorized. Single signature required on that account type. Adrian's signature. Theo thanked her and hung up. He sat very still for a moment. The lawnmower outside had stopped. The house was quiet again. He looked at the legal pad on his desk, the neat column of numbers in his own handwriting, and something moved through him that wasn't quite anger. It was heavier than anger. It was the feeling of watching a floor you thought was solid reveal itself, slowly, as something that had been hollow the whole time. He thought about Faye, the way she talked about school, about her plans, about the future in the easy, confident way that kids talk about the future when they believe someone has already taken care of the foundation. He picked up his phone again and called his mother. Priscilla answered on the second ring. "I found something else," Theo said. He heard her settle, the small sound of her sitting down, giving him the room to speak. He told her about the college fund, the amounts, the timeline matching the apartment lease almost exactly. When he finished, there was a brief silence on the line. "Okay," she said. Her voice was calm, but it had shifted into something more focused, more deliberate. "Okay, baby. Listen to me. You have my paralegal background, and I still have my documentation materials from when I worked family law. I want you to bring me every record you have. Every statement, every printout, every forwarded email. We organize it properly. Dates, amounts, sources, clean paper trail. Because when you walk into an attorney's office, you don't want a folder full of loose pages. You want a case." "Yeah," Theo said. "This also affects Faye," Priscilla said, "which means it affects the settlement. A family law attorney is going to want to see this specifically." "I know. You doing all right?" Theo looked at the legal pad. "I'm fine." She let that sit for just a second. "Come by tomorrow. Bring everything." He picked Faye up from Keisha's house at 6:30. She climbed into the passenger seat, still mid-sentence, about something that had happened at school on Friday. A situation involving a group project and someone who hadn't done their part, and the whole dramatic fallout of it. She talked with her hands. She laughed at her own story before she finished telling it. Theo drove and listened and asked the right questions. He kept his face easy, his voice steady. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, the way she gestured, the way she lit up when she got to the funny part, and felt the weight in his chest settle into something harder and quieter than pain. He pulled into the driveway, and Faye hopped out, still talking, disappearing through the front door. Theo sat in the car. The porch light was on. Through the window, he could see the blue flicker of the living room TV. Everything looked like a normal Saturday night. He took out his phone and opened his notes app. He typed, "Consult attorney. Restore fund first. Then everything else." The attorney's name was Diane Coles. She worked out of a small office on the 4th floor of a building downtown. Clean, quiet, no framed motivational quotes on the walls. Just diplomas, a potted plant that was actually alive, and a desk that meant business. Priscilla had used her years ago on a case involving a client's contested estate. "She's precise," Priscilla had told him. "She doesn't waste words." Theo liked her immediately. He set the folder on the desk in front of her and let her work through it. He'd organized everything the way Priscilla had taught him. Chronological, labeled, each section separated by a colored tab. The apartment lease records came first. Then the property management charges pulled from the bank statements, dated and highlighted. Then Wynn's contacts forwarded emails, Adrienne's careful, professional messages to leadership casting quiet doubts on Carol Reyes. Her tone always reasonable, always slightly concerned. The kind of concern that was really a knife. Last came the college fund statements, the withdrawal history, the legal pad with his handwritten totals, which he'd included because Priscilla said a handwritten note showed a person doing their own accounting, not just running a report. Diane Coles read without interrupting. She turned pages slowly. She made 2 small notations in the margin of her own notepad. When she finished, she set the folder down and folded her hands over it. "You have strong grounds," she said. "The financial misconduct alone gives you significant leverage in the settlement, and the college fund withdrawals are going to matter a great deal to a judge. That's marital funds redirected, without mutual consent, to support an undisclosed secondary household." She paused. "That's not a gray area." Theo nodded once. "I want to advise you on the fund specifically," Diane said. "Before we file anything, I'd like you to begin restoring it from your own savings. Quietly. Full amount." "Why before?" "Because once she knows proceedings are in motion, her first move may be to claim that account was always in that condition, that you misremembered, or that you've been mismanaging it jointly for years." Diane's voice was even. "If the balance is restored before we file, and we have your bank records showing the transfer from your personal savings, you have a clean before and after. She can't rewrite the history of an account that's already been made whole by you. Not her." It was smart, clean, the kind of logic Theo respected. "I can move the funds this week," he said. "Good." She clicked her pen. "I'll begin preparing the filing. Plan for 2 weeks." He moved the money the next morning. $11,240 transferred from his personal savings into Faye's college account. He took a screenshot of the confirmation page. He printed it. He put it in the folder. Then the week started in earnest. Priscilla's dining room table turned into a workspace. She had a label maker, a 3-hole punch, and the kind of focused energy that Theo remembered from when she used to review case files in the evenings after dinner when he was a kid. She organized the physical documents while Theo handled the digital copies, creating a backup folder Wynn had encrypted on a shared drive only the 3 of them could access. Wynn handled the HR packet. He had a nose for this kind of work, methodical in a way that surprised people who only knew him as easygoing. He pulled together a clean summary of the sabotage campaign against Carol Reyes, attaching the email evidence and a brief factual timeline. No editorial, no emotion, just what happened, in order, with proof attached. He and Theo went over it twice at the diner, line by line. "This gets filed the same day," Theo said. "Same day," Wynne confirmed. "I'll send it the minute you give me the word." On Thursday evening, Wynne got a text from his contact inside Adrian's company. He called Theo right away. "The promotion announcement," Wynne said. "It's happening at their company recognition event. Next Friday night. A dinner. Garrison and Adrian are both on the program." Theo was quiet for a second. "She hasn't mentioned it." "No," Wynne said. "She wouldn't." Theo thought about that. He thought about the way Adrian had always managed the information he received. What he knew. When he knew it. How much. It had never felt like control, because it had always felt like consideration. "I didn't want to bore you with work stuff." He had let her curate his knowledge of her life for 11 years. "Spouses can attend," Wynne said. "It's an open event." "I know," Theo said. "I'm going to request an invitation." He sent a polite, brief email to the event coordinator that evening. He was Adrienne Bramwell's spouse, he explained. He'd always tried to show up for her professional milestones when his schedule allowed. He hoped there was still room. The confirmation came back Friday morning. One additional guest. Bramwell +1. Dinner started at 7. Theo read the email at his desk. He closed the confirmation. He pulled the evidence folder from his desk drawer and set it flat in front of him. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed it. For the first time in weeks, his chest felt still. The venue was a hotel ballroom on the east side of downtown. Clean lines, warm lighting, round tables dressed in white linen. The kind of room designed to make people feel like their careers mattered. Theo arrived at 7:15. He wore the dark navy suit Priscilla had pressed for him that afternoon. Crisp white shirt. No tie. He'd thought about the tie and decided against it. He didn't want to look like he was trying. He wanted to look like himself. Calm, put together. Someone who belonged exactly where he was standing. The envelope was in his inside jacket pocket. The folder was under his arm, tucked flat against his ribs. He handed his name at the door and walked in. The room was already humming. 100 people or so, small clusters, glasses of wine and sparkling water, the low murmur of professional small talk, a low stage at the far end, a podium with a microphone that nobody was using yet. He spotted Adrienne before she spotted him. She was near the stage, standing with Garrison, both of them angled toward a small group that included a woman Theo recognized from a photo on Adrienne's company website. Sandra Moll, VP of Regional Sales, Adrienne's direct boss, the person who would be making the announcement. Adrienne looked the way she always looked at work events, polished, poised, her dark blazer sharp at the shoulders, her posture easy and confident. She was laughing at something Garrison had just said. Garrison stood with one hand in his pocket. He had the relaxed look of a man who already knew how the evening was going to go. Theo watched them for a moment from across the room. Neither of them had seen him yet. He got a glass of water from a passing server and moved along the edge of the room, unhurried, taking his time. He wasn't going to rush. He had come this far by not rushing. It was Adrienne who finally saw him. He watched it happen. Her eyes swept the room the way they always did at social events, habit more than instinct, and then they stopped, landed on him. Her smile didn't fall, it just froze, suspended for a second too long before she corrected it. She said something brief to Garrison and stepped slightly away from the group, her chin lifting just a little, the posture of someone recalibrating. Theo crossed the room toward her. Not fast. Not slow. Garrison noticed him a moment later. His expression stayed smooth, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Theo." Adrienne's voice was steady, but the warmth in it was manufactured, thin as paper. "I didn't know you were coming." I requested an invitation, Theo said. A few days ago. Big night for you. I wanted to be here. She studied him. He could see her trying to read the angle, figuring out what he knew, how much, whether this was just awkwardness or something worse. It's a work event, she said carefully. I know what it is. Garrison extended a hand. Garrison Locke. Adrian talks about you. Theo looked at the hand for just a moment. Then he shook it. Firm, brief. I know who you are. Something crossed Garrison's face. The barest flicker. Theo glanced toward the small cluster nearby. Sandra Mall was 4 feet away, talking to a colleague, half turned in their direction. Close enough. Can we step over here for a second? Theo said quietly. Not a question with much room in it. He moved them, just the 3 of them, a few feet to the side, closer to the wall, away from the main flow of the crowd, but still well within the open room, still visible. He'd chosen the spot before he'd even walked over. He set the folder against his side and looked at Adrienne. I'm going to say this once, he said. I'm not going to raise my voice. Her eyes were careful now, watchful. I know about the apartment, Theo said. The one on Mercer Street. 14 months. I have the lease and every payment record. Adrienne's mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. I know about Carol Reyes. He kept his voice low and even. I have the emails, Adrienne. The ones you sent to leadership. The ones where you were so professionally concerned about her reliability. His tone didn't change. Word for word. Garrison went very still. And I know about Faye's college fund. Theo said it the same way he'd said everything else. Quiet, flat, precise. No performance in it. $11,000. Moved into your personal account. I know the dates. I know the amounts. I know which account it went to. Adriana's face was changing. The color was leaving it slowly, like water draining from a glass. Theo reached into his jacket pocket and drew out the sealed envelope. He held it out to her. She took it without thinking, the way people take things when they don't know what else to do. That's your copy of the financial records, he said. The divorce filing went in 2 days ago. The HR complaint about the Reyes situation was submitted this morning. From the corner of his eye, Theo caught movement. Sandra Mall had turned. She wasn't pretending to talk to her colleague anymore. She was watching Theo with quiet, focused attention, taking in his stillness, his folder, the envelope now in Adrienne's hand. Adrienne noticed her boss at the same moment. What little color remained left her face entirely. Theo buttoned his jacket. He looked at Adrienne one last time. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with the clear, settled eyes of a man who had finished something. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, steady and unhurried, without raising his voice once. The attorney's office was on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and fresh coffee. Plain furniture. A wall of filing cabinets, a window that looked out over a parking lot, and, beyond it, a strip of gray sky. Theo sat across from his attorney, Dana Ossie, a compact woman in her 40s with reading glasses she kept pushing up her nose. A thick folder lay open between them on the desk. Let's go through the updates, Dana said. Theo nodded. She flipped to the first section. HR at Adrienne's company completed their review of the Reyes complaint 10 days ago. They validated it. The sabotage campaign was substantiated by the emails and 2 corroborating statements from co-workers who came forward after the complaint was filed. She paused. Garrison Locke's promotion was formally rescinded. He's currently under an ethics review that could result in termination. Theo didn't smile. He just listened. Adrienne's situation is more complicated internally, but the direction is clear. She was removed from the regional director role 2 weeks ago. They called it a restructuring. Dana took her glasses off and set them on the desk. It wasn't a restructuring. I know, Theo said. Her reputation inside that company is gone, Theo. When the Reyes complaint surfaced, people started talking. Colleagues who'd had doubts about her for years finally said them out loud. She's been showing up to an office where nobody trusts her. Dana paused. I've been told she tendered her resignation last Thursday. The room was quiet for a moment. Theo had spent 11 years watching Adrienne build that career. Every dinner party, every strategically sent holiday card to the right people, every polished story about a deal closed or a team she'd mentored. She had constructed that professional identity the way a person builds a house, brick by careful brick. It had taken her 11 years. It had taken less than 6 weeks to come down. The divorce settlement, Dana said, moving to the next section. Her attorney came back this morning. They're accepting the terms. Theo leaned forward slightly. Full restoration of Faye's college fund, Dana read. 100%. Structured guarantee with penalties for non-compliance. She looked up. She's not fighting it. She knows what fighting it would look like in front of a judge. Theo let out a slow breath through his nose. The asset division is favorable. The house goes to you since Faye is still in school and her primary residence needs to stay stable. Adrienne walks away with the personal account she was building and her own debts. Dana closed the folder, which, given the apartment and everything attached to it, are considerable. Priscilla had been busy on her end too. She didn't gossip. That wasn't her way. But she moved through their family and their circle of friends the way she'd once moved through courtrooms, with quiet authority, clear language, and no room for confusion. She called people directly. Adrienne's cousin, who had always been friendly with Theo. The couple they'd socialized with for years, who Adrienne had leaned on for support in the first weeks after the separation. Theo's co-worker who'd heard fragments and needed the full picture. She didn't dramatize. She just told them what happened. The apartment, the college fund, the sabotage of a co-worker's career to clear her boyfriend's path. She spoke in plain sentences with plain facts, and she let people draw their own conclusions. Most of them drew the same one. Theo did his part too. He had 2 or 3 conversations of his own, with people who deserved to hear it from him directly. He kept his voice level every time. He answered questions honestly and didn't embellish. He didn't need to embellish. By the end of it, the social world Adrienne had spent years carefully curating. The dinner party circuit, the neighborhood friendships she'd treated like professional assets, had mostly gone quiet on her. Not with cruelty, just with distance. The distance was enough. Dana slid the final settlement papers across the desk. 2 copies, tabbed with small yellow arrows. "Take your time," she said. Theo read through it. He already knew what it said. He'd read the draft 3 times over the past week in the quiet of his home office after Faye had gone to bed. But he read it again now, carefully, the way he did everything important. He picked up the pen. He signed his name on the first copy, then the second. His handwriting was steady. Dana countersigned, slid 1 copy into the folder, handed the other across to him. "That's it," she said. "It's done." Theo looked at the papers in his hand for a moment. Then he slid them into the folder he'd carried in, the same one he'd had under his arm in that hotel ballroom 6 weeks ago. He stood up, shook Dana's hand, and thanked her. He took the elevator down. When the lobby doors opened, the cold air hit him first, clean and sharp, carrying the faint smell of rain. He walked out into the parking lot, hands in his coat pockets, the folder tucked under his arm. He stopped at his car, just stood there for a second, keys in his hand, looking up at the gray sky. The weight had been there so long he'd stopped noticing it. He noticed it now because it wasn't there anymore. He exhaled, long and slow and quiet, like setting something heavy down. The cabin smelled the same, pine sap and old wood, and something faintly damp from the lake. Theo noticed it the moment Wynne pushed the front door open. That specific smell, the one that had greeted him every year for a decade. Some things stayed the same. He was glad this one had. "Rods, go on the porch," Wynne called back over his shoulder, already heading inside. "I know where the rods go," Theo said. Faye looked up from the open trunk. "Do you, though? Because you put them in the wrong spot last time." "That was one time. It was a notable time." She was grinning. Theo grabbed the tackle box and shook his head. But he was smiling too. The other two, Marcus and Dre, old college friends who hadn't missed a trip in 9 years, were already hauling bags up the porch steps, arguing about who had remembered to bring the good coffee and who had brought the gas station stuff. Same argument as every year. Different outcome, never. Faye pulled out the last bag from the trunk and slung it over her shoulder. She was 16, almost 17 now, taller than he remembered noticing, wearing one of his old flannel shirts with the sleeves rolled up. She'd asked 2 months ago if she could come for the first part of the trip. Just the weekend, before Marcus and Dre got deep into their fishing competition and the late-night card games she had no interest in. He'd said yes before she finished asking. They set up on the dock in the late afternoon, the lake flat and silver in the pale sun. Faye sat cross-legged beside him while he threaded line through her rod's guides, talking through it slowly. "Pull it tight," he said. "You want tension, not slack." She pulled, tested it, nodded. Wynne sat a few feet down the dock with his feet dangling over the edge, already watching his line. He'd glanced over at Theo and Faye twice without saying anything. That was Wynne's version of warmth. Quiet acknowledgement. "Dad." "Yeah? Is it always this quiet here?" Theo looked out at the water. A bird moved low over the far shore. The trees on the opposite bank were starting to turn, the edges going gold and rust. "That's the point," he said. Faye considered that. Then she cast her line, not perfectly, but with confidence, and settled into the silence beside him the way she'd always settled into their best moments together. Easy, unhurried, like she belonged there. She did belong there. The side venture with Wynne had turned into something real. 3 properties now, 2 of them fully occupied and generating steady income. A third they'd rehabbed and listed last spring for a number that had made Theo sit back in his chair and look at the ceiling for a good 30 seconds. What had started as a side project, something to do with money they didn't want sitting still, had become a proper business, with a name and an accountant, and meetings that felt like real meetings. Wynne had wanted to hire staff. Theo had said, not yet. His project management instincts. Check the foundation before you build the next floor. But the foundation was solid. He knew that now. Faye's college fund was back. All of it. Fully restored during the settlement, with a structured guarantee Dana had built in teeth first. Theo had checked it again last month, sitting at his home office desk on a quiet Sunday morning. The balance had stared back at him from the screen, healthy and whole. He'd closed the laptop and made breakfast. That was enough. They ran low on firewood that evening, and Theo volunteered for the supply run, a short drive down the highway to the gas station with the small general store attached. Faye came with him, riding shotgun with her feet up on the dash, scrolling through her phone in comfortable silence. The gas station was the only lit-up thing for half a mile in any direction. Theo pulled in, killed the engine. "You want anything?" he asked. "Those chips. The ones in the orange bag." "I don't know which ones you mean." "Yes, you do." He got out. He found the firewood stacked in bundles on the side of the building, grabbed 2, and turned toward the entrance. That's when he saw her. Adrienne was standing near the far pump, alone. She was wearing a plain coat he didn't recognize, her hair pulled back simply. No polish, no careful assembly of the image he'd watched her tend for 11 years. She looked like someone who had stopped maintaining something and was only now getting used to what that felt like. She saw him at the same moment. Something moved across her face. Recognition. Then something harder to name. She raised one hand in a small, uncertain wave. Her lips parted like she was about to find something to say. Theo looked at her steadily. He gave a single, brief nod. Nothing more. He walked inside, bought the firewood bundle receipt and the chips in the orange bag, and pushed back out through the glass door into the cool night air. Faye had the window down, elbow resting on the door. He put the bags in the back and got in. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. He pulled out of the lot and pointed the car back toward the cabin, toward the warm light in the trees, toward the sound of Win and Marcus arguing about the fire, toward his daughter's quiet company in the seat beside him. He didn't look in the rearview mirror. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.